Let's bring in Fox News contributor Liz Peek. So, Liz, the accusation is that President Trump is trying to make us the world's policeman. Is that the case, or is he enhancing U.S. security?
Yeah, I think in every one of those cases that Mark Warner talked about, there was a really very strong reason why President Trump felt he had to act. And by the way, John, one of the reasons he has been activist and felt like he had to respond to threats against the homeland is because Joe Biden did absolutely nothing for 4 years, leaving us very vulnerable to a lot of attacks from different countries. Let's take Yemen. Why attack Yemen? Well, because they were trying to attack Navy ships and also commercial ships operating in the Red Sea. So, yeah, that seems like a pretty good, reasonable use of firepower. Greenland, I think that's President Trump pranking the Democrats. I don't think he has any interest in attacking an ally, which is what Greenland is. Venezuela was a law enforcement operation, which, by the way, a nanosecond ago, Democrats were totally in support of jailing Nicolas Maduro and had put a $25 million bounty on his head just a year ago. So I think this is overwrought. In Iran, what President Trump is responding to is, I think, recent reports of as many as 500 protesters now being killed by the Ayatollah and his henchmen. This is a desperate situation. Without a doubt, we have the moral high ground. And it's not just the moral high ground that's driving President Trump. It is a decade, maybe 2 decades of Iran basically funding proxies to the tune of billions of dollars every year, whose purpose has been to undermine the United States, kill American soldiers, and also kill Israelis and the IDF. So I think Iran is a special situation. If we are able to help the protesters topple the regime, the theocratic, autocratic regime of the mullahs in Iran, that would be a huge victory for world peace, certainly for the West, for the Gulf Arab nations, and by the way, for the people of Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, and other far left countries in South America that are being funded by Iran. So I think you can really make a very strong case that all of these incidents are completely within the purview of putting America first.
I want to put up a graphic that shows U.S. military strikes in 2025, and it includes those countries on the list that Senator Mark Warner ticked off, Iran being the one on the far right. If memory serves correctly, the last big uprising of the Iranian people came during the Obama administration, and there was next to no response by the United States, and the mullahs simply squelched that by killing hundreds of people.
And they hope to do that again. Obama, remember, really believed that if we encourage trade and other sort of reciprocal activities with Iran, that Iran would become one of the good guy favored nations. It never happened. He was completely blind to the fact that Iranians chant death to America, not because they like the sound of it, but because they mean it, and death to Israel because they mean they want to kill all the Jews. This is not a regime that we should have any patience or forbearance for. And remember that Joe Biden came in and basically undid the very severe sanctions that Trump had put in place in the first term. Sanctions which had reduced their oil exports to less than 500,000 barrels a day. All of a sudden, oil exports under Joe Biden rose again to about 1.5 million barrels a day. Joe Biden, again, I mean, the foreign policy, as Bill Gates said, he's been wrong on everything for 40 years. With Iran, I think he was catastrophic. And to build back up Iran's foreign reserves, which happened under Biden, empowered them to fund the Hezbollah terrorists that have made life impossible for Americans in Lebanon and fighting in Iraq and so forth. Fund Hamas, which obviously in October 7th devastated Israel. And also fund the Houthis, which again have been really bad actors in terms of trying to wipe out essential shipping around the world. So, I think Iran, a more cooperative Iran is certainly a great ambition that Obama had. We're not going to get there by placating them.
All right. Fox News contributor Liz Peek. Liz, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.